You start the year feeling different. Clear, focused, certain. You sit down, open your laptop, pull out images, words, colors. You build a beautiful vision board. It looks like the life you want. It feels exciting to look at. For a moment, you think, this is it. This is finally my year. And then time passes. Not all at once, quietly. A skipped day here, a postponed habit there. You tell yourself you'll get back to it tomorrow. And somehow, without a clear moment of failure, you drift back into the same routines you promised you were done with. What stays isn't anger. It's shame. That low, uncomfortable feeling when you realize you've seen this version of yourself before. The quiet disappointment you don't say out loud. The way you start blaming yourself for not wanting it badly enough, for not being disciplined enough, for always starting strong and fading out. After a while, the pattern hurts more than the goals themselves. You stop trusting your own motivation. You stop believing your excitement means anything. And every new year begins to feel like a repeat instead of a reset. This video isn't here to hype you up. It's not about manifestation. It's not productivity tricks, morning routines, or telling you to try harder. Because this pattern isn't random. And vision boards don't fail because you're weak or inconsistent. They fail for a reason. What you're missing isn't more desire. It's a different way of understanding change, one built around identity, habits that actually stick, the environment you live in, and the internal resistance that shows up right after motivation disappears. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why motivation fades and what actually creates follow-through when the excitement is gone. Vision boards don't fail because you lack discipline. They fail because they give you emotional progress without requiring behavioral change. When you visualize the life you want, your brain responds as if something meaningful has already happened. You feel clarity. You feel hopeful. You feel certain. That feeling matters, but it's also misleading. Your brain releases a small reward just for imagining success, even when your daily behavior hasn't changed at all. And once that reward is given, the urgency to act quietly drops. That's why vision boards feel productive. They create a sense of movement without friction. You've decided who you want to become. So emotionally, it feels like you're already on the way. But nothing in your environment has changed. No habits have been built. No systems are supporting that future version of you. So when real life shows up, when things feel boring, slow, or uncomfortable, there's nothing holding you in place. This is where guilt usually enters. You look back and think, I was so motivated. Why didn't I follow through? And you turn that question inward. You assume the problem is you. But the problem isn't a lack of desire. It's that desire alone doesn't create momentum. Think about how easy it is to spend an hour refining your vision board, rearranging images, perfecting the words. You stand up, feeling inspired, almost accomplished. Then the next day looks exactly the same as before. The work you avoided yesterday still feels just as heavy today. That's the false sense of progress at work. Visualization gives you certainty without structure. And without something concrete to carry that vision into your daily actions, the feeling fades, leaving you confused about why you ever felt so confident in the first place. And that confusion is the first signal that something deeper needs to change. You don't fail goals. You return to your identity. Every time things get hard, confusing, or uncomfortable, you don't rise to your intentions. You fall back to who you believe you are. That's not a flaw. That's how humans work. Intention is fragile under pressure. Identity is not. At the start of the year, you act inspired. You behave like someone who has it together. You wake up motivated, make plans, talk differently about the future. But inspiration is a temporary state. And when that state fades, as it always does, your behavior defaults to something much older and much deeper. You act in alignment with the version of yourself you trust the most. The version you've repeated the longest. The version that feels familiar when life gets stressful. That's why stress is such a powerful test. When your day is busy, when you feel tired, when progress is slow, you don't ask, "What do I want?" You ask without realizing it, "Who am I right now?" And you answer that question with action. If you see yourself as someone who starts but doesn't finish, quitting feels normal. If you see yourself as inconsistent, inconsistency feels honest. If you see yourself as trying, stopping doesn't feel like failure, it feels like relief. This is the difference between acting inspired and being consistent. Inspiration is something you perform when conditions are perfect. Consistency is something you embody when conditions aren't. That's why goals alone don't change behavior. They sit on top of identity instead of reshaping it. And when there's a conflict between who you want to become and who you believe you are, identity always wins. Not because you're weak, but because you're being internally consistent. And once you see that clearly, the problem stops being about effort and starts being about alignment. Internal resistance shows up at the exact moment your vision collides with reality. And that's not a problem. It's a signal. The moment the excitement fades, something inside you tightens. Tasks start to feel heavier. Distractions feel more tempting. You hesitate, delay, avoid. And almost automatically, you judge yourself for it. You tell yourself you're procrastinating, that you're lazy, that something is wrong with you. But resistance isn't a character flaw. It's a nervous system response. Growth always introduces uncertainty. It asks you to step into a version of yourself that hasn't been proven yet. And your brain doesn't like that. It prefers what's familiar, predictable, and safe, even if what's familiar is the very thing you said you wanted to change. Certainty feels safer than progress. That's why discomfort is unavoidable. Not because the goal is wrong, but because the process challenges the version of you that feels known. When novelty disappears and repetition begins, resistance takes over. The work stops feeling exciting and starts feeling real. Think about how easy it is to avoid a task once it stops giving you that rush of motivation. You don't quit loudly. You just open another tab. You check your phone. You tell yourself you'll do it later, when you feel more ready. And for a moment, that avoidance feels like relief. But relief is not progress. It's just a return to familiarity. The mistake is assuming resistance means you're on the wrong path. In reality, resistance often means you're standing right at the edge of change. The discomfort you're trying to escape is the same discomfort that signals growth is actually happening. Once you stop treating resistance as an enemy, you stop fighting yourself. And when that happens, quitting no longer feels like the only way to feel okay again.
Big goals don't usually fail because they're unrealistic. They fail because they threaten your sense of safety. When a habit feels too big, too intense, or too different from who you believe you are, your system reacts before you can think your way through it. Even if the goal sounds reasonable on paper, emotionally it feels risky. And when something feels risky, your brain looks for a way out. Not because you don't care, but because it's trying to protect you from change that feels too abrupt. This is why habits need to be small enough to feel safe. Small habits lower emotional friction. They don't ask you to become a new person overnight. They ask you to show up as you are and take one step that doesn't trigger fear, pressure, or self-judgment. When the action feels manageable, your system doesn't resist it. You're more likely to do it again tomorrow. And that's where self-trust begins. Every time you follow through on a small action, you collect evidence. Evidence that you keep promises to yourself. Evidence that you can be consistent. Evidence that change doesn't always have to hurt. Over time, that evidence quietly reshapes how you see yourself. Think about the difference between saying, I'm going to completely change my routine, and simply showing up for 5 minutes of the behavior you want to repeat. The first feels heavy. The second feels doable. And the second is the one that actually changes your identity. Tiny actions don't look impressive. They don't match the scale of your vision board. But they do something far more important. They reinforce a new self-image through repetition. And once your identity begins to shift even slightly, the behavior stops feeling forced. It starts to feel natural.
If change depended on willpower alone, you would have figured this out already. The truth is, your environment is making decisions before you do. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, through defaults, through convenience, through what's easiest when your energy is low and your attention is scattered. You don't wake up and choose your behavior from scratch every day. You fall into what's already set up around you. The phone within reach, the tab already open, the couch positioned closer than the notebook. These aren't moral failures. They're design outcomes. Consistency isn't about how motivated you feel. It's about how much friction exists between you and the action you want to take. High friction kills follow-through. Low friction makes habits feel automatic. This is why relying on discipline keeps failing. Discipline asks you to fight your surroundings over and over again. Design removes the fight entirely. When the desired behavior is the easiest option, you don't need to convince yourself. You just move. When avoidance takes effort, you pause long enough to choose differently. Think about how often you default into old habits, simply because they're already there. The environment hasn't changed, so the behavior hasn't either. And your vision keeps losing, not because it's weak, but because it's unsupported. The shift happens when you stop asking, why can't I stick to this? And start asking, what is my environment training me to do? Small changes matter here. Moving objects, removing cues, placing reminders where your future self will actually see them. These aren't productivity tricks. They're structural support. When your space aligns with who you're trying to become, follow-through stops feeling like a battle. It starts feeling like the default. At this point, a quiet voice usually shows up. It sounds reasonable, familiar. It says you've tried before. It says this year feels different, but you've told yourself that before too. It reminds you that you always start strong and eventually drift back. Not dramatically, just slowly enough to pretend it didn't happen. That voice isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you. When you move toward change, especially real change, your sense of identity gets involved. And identity does not like uncertainty. It prefers what's familiar, even if what's familiar no longer serves you. So when discomfort appears, your brain labels it as a warning instead of what it actually is, a sign that something is shifting. Discomfort doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're no longer acting on autopilot. This is where most people misinterpret what's happening. They feel resistance and assume they lack discipline, clarity, or motivation. In reality, they're experiencing the friction of becoming someone new, of acting before the identity feels fully formed. You don't need confidence to start. Confidence is not a prerequisite. It's a byproduct. Waiting to feel ready keeps you trapped in the version of yourself that already exists. Permission to start imperfectly is what allows movement to happen at all. Progress still counts, even when it's quiet, even when you don't feel inspired, even when no one is watching, especially then. Motivation fading doesn't mean the plan failed. It means you've reached the part where change stops being emotional and starts being structural, where novelty wears off and reality begins. That moment isn't a signal to quit. It's the moment the work actually starts. The goal here isn't to eliminate resistance. That would mean you're not stretching anything. The goal is to stop treating resistance as a verdict on who you are. It's not proof that you always quit. It's proof that you're standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. And that edge is uncomfortable by definition. Nothing has gone wrong, because this feels harder than you expected. This is what it feels like when a new identity hasn't fully caught up to your actions yet. What changes after this isn't your ambition. It's the way you relate to it. You're moving from imagining a future to building systems that support it. From relying on motivation to creating habits that don't require it. From chasing goals to becoming someone who acts in alignment with who they're choosing to be. You're becoming the kind of person who doesn't wait to feel ready, the kind who understands that consistency matters more than intensity, the kind who keeps showing up even when the feeling that started everything is gone. Not perfectly, just repeatedly. Nothing here asks you to overhaul your life. You don't need a dramatic reset. You need one small action that you can repeat without negotiating with yourself. One habit that feels almost too easy, but that you can do even on a bad day. That's where self-trust actually starts to form. Choose one behavior, make it small, make it specific, then let it be enough for now. If you take a moment after this video, reflect on where you've been relying on vision instead of structure. Apply one idea, not all of them. Let progress be quiet. And if this way of thinking resonates, there's more to build on here. You can continue learning, continue refining, continue becoming someone who follows through not because it feels exciting, but because it feels aligned. You don't need a new year to start over. You just need your next repeatable action.